Welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to be tier ranking the Tertiary and Quaternary Kamen Riders. I'm just including the Quaternary Riders in this list just because there aren't that many of them, and they pretty much serve the same purpose as the Tertiary Riders. So without further ado, this is my tier ranking of the Tertiary and Quaternary Kamen Riders. First is Ryo Ashihara, Kamen Rider Gills. He's a character with a lot of missed potential. I think out of the three main riders in Agito, he's definitely the most interesting, but just not much is done with him. He gets very little to do, even when the story does focus a little bit more on him in the second half. The explanation of his Gills powers being an imperfect version of Agito is never really explained. It's never really explored that much, and I don't think his personality is that interesting. So I feel like he could have been a really cool character, and the way it turned out, he's just an okay character. So he's C tier. Next is Shuichi Kitaoka, Kamen Rider Zolda, and he's my favorite tertiary rider. His personality as this charismatic lawyer is just so good, and he's pretty much one of the main antagonists in the first half of Ryuki, before becoming Ryuki and Knight's friend. And even early on you can tell that he isn't completely evil, and that his desire to live a lavish lifestyle is just because he has a crippling illness that eventually he succumbs to in the end. Then he eventually dies with no regrets. He's just a great character overall, has a really great rivalry with Oja. He's just my favorite tertiary rider. He's S tier. Next is Shuji Mihara, Kamen Rider Delta. Out of all the characters who wield Delta and Phis, he's easily the least memorable, and just a shame that he's the primary user. Easily the most forgettable rider of all time. I literally remember nothing about him. The only thing I do remember about him is that his actor previously played Go Green from Go-Go 5, and just his personality is nothing. I don't care about him at all. It just sucks that he's the one who gets used Delta the most, so he's D tier. Next is Hajime Aikawa, Kamen Rider Chalice, and he's a very interesting character, and I'd say one of the better tertiary riders. Just the fact that he's the final boss of Blade, but he doesn't really want to do that, and just his connection to the overall lore of Blade and him defeating the human undead and getting that disguise is super interesting, and just that he wants to live among the humans and not have to be the Joker is pretty cool. I wouldn't say he's the most memorable character. He has some funny, memorable moments that I don't think were supposed to be funny, but it was just his performance kind of came out as funny. But overall, he's a pretty good character. He has a great connection to that main lore of Blade, has a pretty wholesome relationship with some of the side characters, so he's pretty good. He's A tier. Next is Mutsuki Kamijo, Kamen Rider Lengel, and he's another character with missed potential. He's originally a weakling who gets taken over by the Spider Undead through the Lengel driver and gets corrupted by its power, and then kind of has to learn to be a hero through Tachibana. But then after he goes through his training with Tachibana, he just gets taken over by the Spider Undead again for like the entirety of the season, so that's just a waste. I feel like by the midpoint, after he went through his training, he should have just been a good guy from then on, instead of retreading the whole being possessed by the Spider Undead for pretty much the entire rest of the season. So he's just pretty big missed potential. He's C tier. Next is Todoroki, Kamen Rider Todoroki. He's one of the more likable characters from Hibiki. He can come off as a little annoying sometimes, but just has a really wholesome relationship with Hinaka Tachibana, and also has a great relationship with his mentor Zanki. Not much else to say about him. He's just a very likable guy, and I like that he got pretty good amount of focus, so he's B tier. Next is So Yaguruma, the first Kamen Rider the Bee. He's a pretty cool character. He comes off as a cool badass leader who follows the mantra of perfect harmony, but he eventually becomes obsessed with trying to defeat Kabuto that it eventually leads to his undoing. I wouldn't say he's the most memorable character, but he's still cool and definitely the best person to wield the Bee. Definitely becomes much less interesting once he becomes Kickhopper, but I'll probably leave that for an Evil Rider video. When he's the Bee, he's just pretty cool, so he's B tier. Next is Shun Kageyama, the second Kamen Rider the Bee. He's one of the most unlikable characters in all of Rider, which I think was by purpose, but still, I think he's not a good character. Well done, but just I don't like him at all. He shows that he's a really bad leader and was never meant to be a leader, which I think is cool, inverse of Yaguruma, who, even though he had his flaws, still showed that he was a good leader. Kageyama was just a completely pathetic person who just wanted to have all the power for himself, and that shows once he becomes the leader, and is just so unlikable, and becomes even more unlikable once he becomes Punch Hopper. So I just hate him with my guts, even though if that's by design, I still really don't like him, so he's D tier. Next is Tsurugi Kamishiro, Kamen Rider Sword, and it's debatable whether he or Drake is the Quaternary Rider of Kabuto, but I always thought Sword because he had more of a role in the story, and he's one of my favorite Quaternary Riders. He's just kind of a goofy version of Soji Tendo as an arrogant rich person, but he has such an interesting backstory as he's the scorpion worm, but he doesn't know that, and he spends the entire season trying to kill the scorpion worm when it is him all along. I kind of wish it was more of a secret instead of just being revealed the first chance they got, but it's still a really interesting story and it has a lot of funny moments, and learning about noblesse oblige and the stuff with his butler is really funny. One of my favorite characters in Kabuto. He's a great character. He's S tier. Next is Taiga Nobori, Kamen Rider Saga. I've always thought he's just a very boring character, and really he's a rival, and Kiva kind of marks where the season starts to go downhill. I just hate how he flip-flops between being Wataru's friend and hating him and stuff like that, even though his connection as the true heir to Dark Kiva or whatever is pretty cool. I just never thought his character was very interesting, and I just hated his flip-flopping and just thought he was a pretty boring character overall, so he's D tier. Next is Yusuke Onodera, AR Kuuga from Decade. He's very boring. He is pretty much just diet Yusuke Godai to a T, and I always feel like the writers just forget about him. He pretty much has nothing to do outside of the Kuuga and Agito AR worlds. He almost never transforms into Kuuga, which I always thought was weird. He only does it like 4 or 5 times throughout the entire season, which sucks, so he just never really does anything, and is just very forgettable. I always forget he's in the season. Probably should have just stayed in the world of Kuuga or Agito, so he's D tier. Next is Mayu Inamori, Kamen Rider Mage. She's debatable if she's a tertiary rider or not, but she's officially considered that, so she'll be here. And she's not too memorable. She does have an interesting backstory in that her twin sister was taken over by Medusa, so that's pretty cool, but other than that, I don't find her particularly interesting personality. I've never really thought Wizard needed more than one rider, but she's still decent, cool backstory. Just, I don't think her personality was that interesting, so she's C tier. Next is Mitsuzane Kirishima, Kamen Rider Yugen, and he's a pretty interesting character. He's really just a generic good guy, but his obsession with Mai eventually leads him to becoming pretty much just Kaiza again, which is pretty cool subversion. He ends up becoming one of the most unlikable characters ever, but it's still done pretty well. Like, he's willing to kill 1 billion people just to save Mai and team with the overlords. He pretty much kills his brother, or he thinks he kills his brother, and then continues to trick Kota into thinking that his brother betrayed him or whatever. So he pretty much just Kaiza again, and that's pretty cool. But I hate what they do with him is that they try to redeem him in the end, which feels completely unwarranted. I feel like he did all this good stuff and then they try to half-ass redeem him in the finale. I would have been fine if they devoted an entire V cinema to that, but they just crammed it into the finale, which sucks. So that kind of drops his stock a lot for me. I still think he's a well done character as a good guy who turns bad. Just I wish he wasn't redeemed in such a bad way. So he's B tier. Next is Takatora Kirishima, Kamen Rider Zangetsu, and he's such a cool character. He's one of the coolest characters in all of Rider. One of the main villains of the first half of Gaim, but he's never really a villain. His goals are noble, he just has the wrong way of carrying them out. He wants to save humanity, but by doing so and carrying out Project Arc, he also kills 1 billion people. But he eventually realizes that that's not the way to go once he actually becomes friends with Kota. I just kind of wish how he was kind of killed off halfway through the season when he's getting more interesting. He's at least not dead, but he just pretty much does nothing after that part, which kind of sucks, but he's just a cool character as a villain who isn't entirely evil and eventually does become good. So he's really cool. He's A tier. Next is Chase, Kamen Rider Chaser, and he's one of the best tertiary riders. He has such an interesting backstory as the original Proto-Drive, who eventually got brainwashed by the Roy Mute and becomes the Grim Reaper. And he's just so cool. Eventually, once he comes back and becomes a good guy again, he has such a wholesome relationship with the rest of the characters, especially with Go and their eventual friendship near the end, and a sacrifice for him is such a good moment in the season. He has a lot of funny moments too, while also still being one of the coolest characters ever. So he has such a cool backstory, has a really cool personality. He's just great. He's S tier. Next is Alan, Kamen Rider Necrom, and he's a decent character. He's a pretty generic bad guy who eventually gets redeemed and becomes good. But it's well done where all his family betrayed him at that point, and he was convinced by his father to leave the Gamma world anyway. So it makes sense. It doesn't feel unwarranted or anything. It feels very earned. Just after he's redeemed, he really doesn't do anything of consequence the rest of the season, so it kind of feels like a waste. But still, it's a pretty good arc and well done, I think. So he's B tier. Next is Taiga Haniya, Kamen Rider Snipe, and he's a pretty good tertiary rider. He's a pretty generic emo edgelord loner that through Nico eventually grows closer to people, which is a very good part of this show. And his backstory is very interesting as the original Kamen Rider who couldn't kill Graphite, and that led to Brave's girlfriend dying from the Bugster virus, which I feel like is never brought up enough. Kind of similar to Brave, how his backstory isn't really used that much. I feel like Snipes even more so is not used very often, especially his rivalry with Graphite is very underutilized. But his stuff with Nico is very good. I just think his personality overall is pretty good, and he's just a good tertiary rider, so he's A tier. Next is Kirya Kujo, Kamen Rider Laser, and he's a great quaternary rider. He just has a really fun personality as a mortician with a really good fashion sense, and as he says, takes people on rides and tricks them and stuff, and that's really cool. He's not a villain, but he still kind of skirts the line from not being a complete goody two-shoes. His death is pretty meaningful, but when he comes back, he really doesn't do anything, so I feel like he was wasted once he came back. But other than that, I think he's a great character, a really good part of X8. He's A tier. Next is Kazumi Sawatari, Kamen Rider Grease, and he's one of the best tertiary riders. I just like his motivation as he just wants to fight for his people and has such a fun personality. He's mostly just used as comic relief once he joins Team Build, but has such a funny relationship with Visara as a Mitan fan, and has great relationships with the Three Crows. He's just a great character overall. He can be serious when he needs to, and he can also pull off being really funny. So he's great. He's S tier. Next is Gentoku Himuro, Kamen Rider Rogue, and he's a decent character. Pretty much has the exact same personality as Snipe, as kind of an edgelord loner, especially after he leaves Choto and becomes like a mercenary for Sato. But again, like Grease, once he joins Team Build, he's pretty much exclusively just used as comic relief, which is kind of lame. I think it kind of undermines his coolness, kind of. But he's still funny, and he's still cool most of the time. So I like him. He's decent. He's B tier. Next is Waz, Kamen Rider Waz, and he's one of my favorite tertiary riders. I wouldn't say he's a great character. He's kind of just a one-note kind of joke character as the herald of Omagio, and always pushing Sogo towards that path, always rejoicing in his presence. This is a really fun personality, and that kind of makes up for him not really being too much of a character. His backstory is pretty much just explained in a throwaway line by Gates in a single episode and never really explained at all, which kind of sucks because we're never given an explanation as to why he follows Omagio so religiously. But still, his personality is so fun and he's such a funny character that I can kind of overlook that, and easily the best part of Geo is Waz, so he's great. He's S tier. Next is Yua Yaiba, Kamen Rider Valkyrie, and she's a pretty good rider. I would say she's the first full-time female rider, but there's always been a problem with female riders since her where they really don't get that much focus. She gets a decent amount of focus in the first half of the season when she's secretly working for Zaya, and especially during the second arc when Haruto and Guy are going head-to-head in their contests, she's a lot more prevalent. But pretty much after she leaves Zaya, she doesn't really do anything the rest of the season, which sucks because she's an interesting character as she was pretty much being used by Guy as a tool like the Huma Gears were being used, so that's an interesting connection. But again, she pretty much gets no focus after the halfway point of the season, so missed potential, but she's still a pretty good character. She's B tier. Next is Kento Fukamiya, Kamen Rider Espada. He's definitely a character who got the shaft most in Saber because he's easily the most interesting character. With the stuff with his father and him coming back as Caliber, he really gets no focus at all. Especially the stuff with his father, it's kind of just a throwaway thing, even though it could have been explored a lot and should have probably replaced the dumb disaster stuff with Kenzan. But also him coming back as Caliber, he really doesn't do anything, and especially his relationship with Toma is almost never explained. They say how good friends they are, but it's never really shown, and their relationship is such a big part of the season along with Luna, but again, it's never shown. We're just told how good friends they are, and that kind of hurts his character a lot, because he still has a lot of cool moments, especially when he comes back as Caliber, but again, the season as a whole really doesn't know how to juggle multiple characters, and he gets the shaft most. So he could have been so much more, but what we got was pretty lackluster, so he's C tier. Next is Sakura Igarashi, Kamen Rider Janu, and again, she's another female writer who gets pretty much no focus at all, which sucks because she could have been really interesting, especially with Lovekov being the reflection of her thinking that she's weak on the inside. Kind of not used very much. I think the worst part about her is that she's basically only used to redeem Aguilera, and that's it. After Aguilera is redeemed, pretty much nothing is done with it. Even a romance between them is hinted at and not really done with at all. So kind of sucks that she's not really a character. She's kind of just used to redeem Aguilera, and then that's it. She could have been a lot more interesting, but that's not what happened. Still has a decent personality and has some good moments, but overall, just she was mishandled very bad. So she's C tier. Next is Neon Kurama, Kamen Rider Nago. She's definitely the best female writer that we've gotten so far, but she still kind of falls into the same problems as before. She gets a pretty decent amount of focus in the first couple arcs, but by the time the Yamato Grand Prix comes in, she's kind of just sidelined pretty much for the entire rest of the season, aside from 2 episodes revealing her backstory, which is very interesting as a creation of the Desire Grand Prix, and then another 2 in the final arc with her dad. But besides from those, she really gets nothing else to do, which sucks because, again, her backstory is very interesting, and especially in the Desire Royale when she and Keiwa wanted to fight to keep the Desire Royale going so she could get her wish granted of everyone forgetting about her. Kind of undone just because the Desire Royale ends without a winner, and that hurts her because after that, they just kind of forget that entire part of her character. Her stuff with her dad is good also, but again, that's kind of the only thing she gets after the midway point of the season. So she's definitely the best female writer that we've gotten so far, but still, she could have been done better. So she's B tier. Next is Michinaga Azuma, Kamen Rider Buffa. He's basically just a cookie cutter secondary writer, as the guy who's just antagonistic towards the primary writer because he thought they slighted him some way, even though it doesn't really make any sense for Buffa to be mad at Geets because he didn't kill his friend or anything. He was just fighting the GGP. So he's a very, very boring character. I am glad that he actually got the power to destroy all riders. Sucks that it's only used in a single arc and it's not even a final form, but still cool. His turn to becoming friends with Geets makes absolutely no sense. It comes out of nowhere. There's no final battle or anything. Just once the Desire Royale ends without a winner, he just sides with Geets for whatever reason. So he's one of the most generic writers of all time. Very boring, but still has some decent moments and can be cool every once in a while. Just very unmemorable. So he's C tier. Next is Spanner Kurigane, Kamen Rider Valvarad. He's probably the only good character from Gotchard. Even so, he's very generic as antagonistic towards the main writer, but eventually accepts their worldview and becomes their friend. But still, he's good. His 2-parter where he becomes Valvarad and his backstory is explained is easily the best 2 episodes of Gotchard, and pretty much any episode that focuses on him is good. Just his personality is so bland, and his resolution to not use chemis as tools and just accept Hotaro's viewpoint of them being his friends comes out of nowhere. Doesn't really make any sense within his character to think that. Kind of just has to happen because that's what happens in all the shows. But he's still cool. Just once he becomes Kamen Rider Valvarad, he really doesn't do anything. But once he does do something, it's always pretty cool because he's the only thing of Gotchard that I actually look forward to, even if he is very generic and not a great character, just a decent character. So he's C tier. Finally, Lucky Amalga, Kamen Rider Ram. He's another character with some missed potential, but overall I think he was well done. I really wish he stayed opposed to Gav for longer. He's really only a villain, I would say, for like 2 episodes and then he joins with Gav. I really hope they would have drawn that out for longer, but it makes sense for him to not be enemies with him. It's cool that he was trying to destroy Sumikik from the inside because they killed his brother, and all that stuff is cool. I just wish he was more antagonistic at the beginning because that would have been just more interesting. Because after that, he really doesn't do much. There are a couple of episodes that he has with Valen that are pretty good, but overall kind of just fillery moments. And really until he fights Glada like 20 episodes after he's revealed is the next time he gets significant focus, and that's only for 2 episodes, so kind of gets shafted a little bit, kind of just gets stuck in fillery subplots. But overall, he's a well done character. I just wish he was a little more ambivalent towards good and evil, for lack of a better term, for longer. So he's a good character. I like him. He's B tier. So here's my tier ranking of the Tertiary and Quaternary Kamen Riders. What do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? I'll probably make Evil Riders next, and then after that do the rest of the supporting writers, but we'll see if I can even do that before the summer ends. Obviously once Gav ends, I'm doing a season review on Gav, and then work towards making a ranking video of every single season of Kamen Rider that I've seen, and then from there we'll see. I want to make a video on Kamen Rider movies, but I still got about 7 movies to finish, so that's probably going to be a while too. So thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed. Feedback is always appreciated. Have a great day.